Hey all y'all, welcome back to my channel. My name is Carrie. This is where I talk about knitting, my tips, my tricks, my opinions, and my preferences. Did you know that there's a whole upside down world of knitting? Ooh. Are there creatures that are going to jump out from your knitting? No, this isn't like Stranger Things, but there is a symmetry to knit stitches that creates a almost parallel set of stitches in between your columns of stitches. Today, I'm going to explain it to you and I'm going to demonstrate how we can take advantage of the upside down stitches for things like provisional cast-ons, and I'll show you how you can always avoid the dreaded 11s. Ooh, maybe there are strange creatures that jump out from your knitting. If you want to find out all about the mysterious world of the upside down stitches, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, give my video a thumbs up, and let's knit. So there is something that you have probably noticed about knitting, which is whether the piece that you are looking at is right side up or upside down. It looks the same, right? It looks like there's stitches no matter what. Here I have a swatch, and this is my cast on row, and this is my bind off here. And if you look, these are my stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So these are all stitches right here. And if I turn this upside down, well, wait, it doesn't look like my stitches are upside down because I have 1, 2, 3, 4, all these stitches right here. What's going on? How is this possible? If you recall from other videos that I have done, link up here if you want to watch them, knitting is a series of interlocked loops of yarn, and those loops of yarn have a very particular shape. It is an undulation of yarn that has these purl bumps at the top and these running bumps on the bottom. If you were to take one of those stitches and divide it in half, you would see that there's a symmetry between both half of the stitches. They're mirrored to each other, right? What that means is when you turn the stitches upside down, those two running threads, they look like purl bumps now, and that purl bump now looks like a running thread. So there are these mirror upside down stitches that exist, but they exist in between the columns of stitches when your work is right side up. I'm going to put my needle right here in the center of the stitch. Okay, so this is the left leg, this is the right leg. If we could see to the back of the work, the purl bump would be right here, and the two running threads would come here and here. I'm going to put my needle right there between the left and the right leg, and I'm going to turn the swatch upside down. And look, now it appears as though my needle is sitting between columns of stitches. But because of that symmetry between stitches, it looks like this here is a stitch, but it's not. This here, this is the right leg of the stitch here, and this is the left leg of the stitch here. I'm going to put my needle right there in between those two legs, and I'm going to turn my work right side up again. And you can see my needle is now sitting in between these two stitches. So this symmetry that exists in knit stitches, it's why if you knit a sweater top down, it doesn't look different than if you had knitted it bottom up. And the same thing for socks. It's because our eyes cannot tell the difference between the real knit stitches that exist here and then the shadow stitches that exist when the work is upside down. Because all it sees is these two legs are forming that V shape that we expect the knitting to look like. This, it's almost an optical illusion, but this symmetry though, it works because all of these stitches are the same color. What happens when one of these stitches is a different color, like you would find in intarsia or stranded color work? Well, let me show you. I'm going to kind of mock that situation by doing a little duplicate stitch, and this is just going to mimic what happens with Fair Isle. In fact, I will duplicate stitch a little motif. Okay, so there's the duplicate stitch, and this almost looks like a little piece of Fair Isle. And you can very clearly see this is a stitch, this is a stitch. You can very clearly see the differences between the stitches here. Watch what happens when I turn this upside down. I'm going to turn this upside down. And now it is very obvious to the eye where that this work is upside down. Why? Because this contrast between the green and the pink, our eye isn't looking at the V's down here, right? Where it looks like a stitch. Instead, our eye is trained on this color difference, and we can see, oh, the V is upside down. And this might be something, I know it's something I experienced, but if you've ever knit a pair of cuff down Fair Isle socks, you might have noticed that the motifs, they can look a little jinky on the edges, and that has to do with the fact that your eye is perceiving that those stitches are upside down. My logo, that sock pattern, is a Fair Isle pattern that I did knit from the cuff down, and part of me has always wanted to redo the sock as a toe up sock, only because I think that the diamonds in the main part of the motif would just look a little bit cleaner, but you know, I think that's a very minor detail I'm probably getting caught up on. So what can you do with this knowledge about the upside down stitches, those sort of stitches that exist in between the column stitches in your knitting? Well, one of the big things that you can do with this knowledge is provisional cast-ons. In fact, most provisional cast-ons rely upon these upside down stitches to work. So let me show you a provisional cast-on that you can use that utilizes the upside down stitches. The first provisional cast-on a lot of people are taught is the crochet provisional cast-on. And by the way, I hate this method that I'm about to show, but I just want to demonstrate it quickly. But it is a good cast-on to demonstrate how provisional cast-ons take advantage of upside down stitches. So with the crochet cast-on, you do a series of slip stitches with a crochet hook like this. And you have to do more slip stitches than what you're going to cast on. So if I was going to cast on 10 provisional stitches, I would do like 15 slip stitches. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay. I'm going to just cut this, and then I can just draw this through to stabilize it. Then what you do is you have these little V's, and they almost look like knit stitches. On the back, you have these bumps here. And what you do is you knit into those bumps on the back of those slip stitches that you did. So you slip your needle underneath that little bump on the back of the slip stitch chain, and then picking up stitches through them. So this is very similar to picking up and knitting along a cast-on row or an edge, but instead you're doing it through this crochet. And you can see here doing this, I use continental knitting, not my usual lever knitting. See, there's advantages to knowing how to do both lever knitting and, so there we go, 10 stitches. So there I have my provisional cast on, and then I would knit a few rows of knitting. So we'll just do that real quick. FYI, if you are interested, all of the materials that I am using today, you can find in the description box. These are affiliate links, which means I do earn a small commission when you utilize the links on qualifying purchases. If you want to find out more about that, you can check out the FAQ on my blog at knitswhereit'sat.weebly.com. So there's my little test pattern right here. I'm going to pull at this provisional cast on I did, and you can see right here, this is the upside down stitch that was created as I was knitting. And each loop is holding on to an upside down stitch, right? So what I need to do is to get this provisional cast on off and pick up these upside down stitches here. There's two ways that I can get these stitches off the provisional cast on. If you're very careful, you can cut out these just cut this leg here and here and trim out the provisional cast on, which I don't love doing because I'm always worried I'm going to cut the knitting itself. Instead, I'm going to undo the slip stitch chain. So I'll undo each chain one by one. And as you pull out, that's what she said. But as you pull out the chain, those slip stitches from the crochet, you pick up the stitch. So I'm going to pick up that stitch, then pull out, unravel that, pick up the stitch, unravel the crochet chain. This is the nice thing about the crochet cast on, is you don't have to cut out the waste yarn. You can unravel it very easily. And voila, it is all picked up. And I have all these upside down stitches now picked up. But notice something. I cast it on 10 stitches. Let's count how many stitches are on my needle right now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Why are there only 9 stitches? Well, that has to do with the nature of the upside down stitches. And what I'm about to say is true when you're knitting flat, but it's not true when you're knitting in the round. When you are knitting flat, you're going to have one less row of upside down stitches than you will regular stitches. That's the nature of it, and it's because that last running leg of the work doesn't connect to anything. It gets folded up into the next row. There's no other leg next to it to complete the upside down V. But in the round, you will have the same number of regular stitches and upside down stitches. And that is because that last running leg in the column of stitches connects to the first stitch of the new round. So you have a completed undulation of yarn. When you're doing provisional cast-ons, there's a couple of different ways that you can compensate for that one less upside down stitch that you have. One is to sort of just create it by digging your needle into a side there and kind of creating a stitch that doesn't really exist, like I just did here. I'll do it again. So here's my last upside down stitch right here. Okay, if I pull this, notice this thread connects down into here. I can pick that up and then I can knit into it, and that works quite nicely. The other thing you can do is you can simply do an increase on this row when you start to work it. And the last thing that you can do, this is a forethought method, is when you cast on your provisional stitches, cast on 1 extra stitch. So I casted on 10 stitches. I picked up 10 stitches in that waste yarn. Instead of picking up 10, I could have picked up 11 stitches in the waste yarn, and then on the first row, decreased one of those stitches away. So there's 3 different ways that you can compensate for the fact that when you're knitting flat, you'll always have 1 less stitch in the upside down world. A lot of times people think there is a provisional cast on. There is not one provisional cast on. Provisional cast ons is a category of cast ons. And all these cast ons are designed to do is to easily pick up those upside down stitches when you're ready to knit in the opposite direction. That's all it is. That's all these cast ons are doing. And the truth is, anything that you knit is going to create that same, those upside down stitches. So if the provisional cast-ons that you've seen using crochet hooks and such are not your cup of tea, guess what? You don't have to use that as your provisional cast-on. You can, in fact, cast on using your favorite cast-on, knit a bit, work a couple of rows, 2, 3, 5 rows is good, of knitting, then switch to your actual yarn you're going to use for your project, and when you're ready to pick up those stitches to work in the opposite direction, you cut away that waste yarn that you used for the first few rows. So you can really use almost any cast on as a provisional cast on, but using that method I just described with the long tail cast on can use, depending on the size of the project, a lot of yarn. So provisional cast-ons are really handy because you're just using a little bit of scrap yarn. If you'd like to see a demonstration of how you can use any cast-on as a provisional cast-on, check out my blog on Wednesday where I will have an exclusive video demonstrating this technique. There are situations in knitting where you need to pick up stitches in the opposite direction of what you're knitting. What am I talking about? Let's use an example because I always think that helps demonstrate things. Right here I have a glove that I knitted and it has a thumb gusset. And here, if you look right here, it looks like you have a series of stitches that are running continuously from the end of the thumb all the way up to the bind off of the fingerless glove. But in fact, it's not. When you knit a thumb gusset into gloves or mittens that you then finish off later, you do increases to create a thumb gusset. When you've gotten all your stitches that you need for the thumb gusset, you take the stitches of the thumb gusset and they go onto a waste yarn, and then you cast on new stitches to bridge the gap here. And in fact, I'm going to turn this inside out. If you look very closely here, right here, this looks a little wonky. That's a cast on edge. And then what I did when it was time to work the thumb stitches, I picked up stitches along that cast on edge to then knit this way up the stitches. This looks a little jinky right now because I haven't woven in the edge. When I'm done, if I don't pick up the stitches correctly along that cast on row, you get what are called the 11s. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this swatch and I'm going to pick up along my cast on row. And the first time I do it, I'm going to do it incorrectly so you can see what the 11s look like. And then the second time I will do it correctly so that you can see how you can create what looks like a continuous row of stitching worked in both directions. I'm going to use a crochet hook to do this because I think it's easier when picking up along any kind of edge to use a crochet hook, but you don't have to. You can use a knitting needle to do this. I just like using a crochet hook. Here are my knit stitches, right? And I want to create a new row of stitches coming in the opposite direction. What I'm going to do is the first time I'm going to do this incorrectly. So Here I have my column of stitches. I want stitches to come off this way, so I will stick my crochet hook here in the middle, like that. Now let's pause here and notice where my crochet hook is. Now my swatch is upside down. You can see the upside down stitch to the left of my crochet hook. My crochet hook is sitting in between the upside down stitches. All right, so that means as we pick up stitches along the cast on row, we're going to be picking them up in between the upside down stitches. All right, now let's turn this around and look. Wait, look here. If you look real closely now, look at the way these stitches are kind of bunched together. It just doesn't look correct. I'm going to knit a couple of rows so you can see what that looks like. So I have just knitted a couple of rows here. And we're going to take a look at what the results are. Does this pink there look like knit stitches? No. No, they don't. This is called the 11s or the deadly 11s. And this happened because even though this right here, this looks like a V, these look like stitches, I picked up in the wrong spot because I tried to pick up into this stitch, but I wasn't knitting in the same direction. I wasn't knitting from the bottom up, I was knitting from the bottom down. So right now, these are in fact upside down stitches. And the 11s are created because the upside down stitches are squishing together the left leg of one stitch and the right leg of another. So what we want to do is not pick up into the stitch. We want to pick up in between the stitches to avoid the 11 so that the V comes out here and here, like this. So that means I'm going to pick up in the middle of the upside down stitches, which actually, truth be told, is easier to do. So now I'm going to show you the right way to do this. I'm going to look at my work. Here is my upside down stitch, and I'm going to pick up into the middle of that upside down stitch, which means I am picking up in between. I'm picking up in between the regular stitches, the real world stitches, not the strange things stitches. All right, so there, I picked those up, and look, already if I turn this around, notice I haven't even started knitting yet, and I can see that these stitches look normal. These look like normal stitches here, where I've picked up along that cast on row. So that is how you can knit into the upside down world and make sure that the upside down world and the regular world of stitches all looks continuous and beautiful, and you avoid the dreaded 11s. Let me know what you think about all this. Ask me any questions you might have down in the comments below. If you enjoyed today's video, please give it a thumbs up. It does help the YouTube algorithm know that I am a channel worth checking out. If you have not already, make sure that you do subscribe and hit the notification bell, which will let you know whenever I upload a new video or I am doing a live stream. Every Sunday at 11 a.m. Pacific time, I do an hour-long live stream where we talk about knitting, whatever video I've put up. We talk about whatever we want to talk about. Truth be told, it's a really good time. I'd love for you to join us there. Again, that is every Sunday at 11 a.m. Pacific time. If you want to keep up to date with all the things that's going on, follow me on social media. You can find all that in the description box below, and be sure to check out my blog at knitswhereit'sat.com. At the blog, I do oftentimes give supplemental information to the video and sometimes give an exclusive bonus little piece of video at the blog. I hope that you have a wonderful day, evening, weekend, weeknight, whenever you may be watching this. And as always, happy health and happy knitting. Bye! Your stitches, your knitting is going to look the same, whether it's whether it's right. Today, I'm going to explain all of this to you and show you how we can use this mysterious world of the upside down stitches for provisional cast-ons and almost had it. All right, watch. Want to try to say something and she'll yell. All right. Woo! Made it. Made it. Made it. Just one card. Yes. I'm always very excited when I shoot my videos with just one card. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 bum.